So I have a little Sunday evening download for you, and it's mostly about narcissism, a very popular topic today. I've been researching and developing a docu-series on the topic of decoding assholes, um, and I've been researching a lot on this. And what's fascinating, of course, is to initially notice that there are people among us who are instinctively abusive, that their behavior really does hurt us. And you notice these people stick out in your life once you realize what they were doing, because it's really painful and it hurts you. And it also creates some trauma that then lives on in you for a while if you don't heal it. And sometimes you act out in similar ways. So in a way, narcissism is contagious. The insights I've had around this topic are quite profound, that I found that, everyone has some narcissism in them, and I have had some narcissistic tendencies myself. Examples are simply getting the attention on me frequently in conversations or group settings. Sort of subtly maybe one-upping other people. Someone's talking about themselves, and they're like, oh, well, I did something just like that, 2 years ago, and it was so profound. It was blah, 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 so much better than yours, essentially, is what's being conveyed without saying it in such words. Also just sort of a grandiose sense of self that, well, I'm a leader, I should be the leader of this group. Or all of these patterns come out of a lack of self-esteem. It come out of a belief, I believe, of I'm not worthy. And when you realize that that's where narcissism comes from, and then you think about how everybody in the world has that feeling occasionally of I'm not worthy, and that we're all reactively covering it up with arrogance, with grandiosity, with a story of bigness, then you realize, holy moly, this is a universal psychological condition. And that all of us react on different levels. Some of us react in different ways, where we're basically becoming pleasers and basically humbling ourselves to avoid direct conflict with other abusive people, with arrogant assholes. And we become patterned that way. And so then we're always attracting that type of person to us because we get along well, relatively well. They get along with us better than anyone else. And so they're drawn to us if we're pleasers. But the pleaser is just the inverse of the narcissist. And the only reason we're pleasers, again, is because we're having low self-esteem. We wouldn't feel the need to please anybody if we felt completely filled up and satisfied and worthy inside. So it's not as clear-cut as this abuser and victim mentality that we're trying to create it to be. And that's what has bothered me so much in the last 2 years of my research, is seeing so many people talking about it in this duality of the empath and the narcissist. The narcissist abuses the empath, and we just can't help we're just victims of this situation. We couldn't possibly help it. It's like, no, you can help it. It's called boundaries. It's called self-respect, and noticing when your boundaries are being crossed and saying, excuse me, no, thank you. And I know better than most people how difficult that is, because I struggle with it myself. I very much struggle with boundaries. And I think that has a combination of things to do with how I grew up and different relationships in my life that sort of were bullying to me and made me feel like I had to be a pleaser or, flex or become passive or submissive in order to get out of the conflict. And so I'm familiar with that. But I've been on both sides of this too. When I was younger, I was a bully for a number of years in grade school. And I can rationalize it in a whole bunch of different ways. People ask me now, they're like, you a bully? No way. But I was, and there were specific experiences I had where I was picking on kids. Yes, I had friends that also sort of picked fights for me that I would then finish for them. But it was I specifically remember targeting a kid who was already unpopular, already not getting along with people, and just kind of hating them, kind of just hating how they were awkward and how they didn't fit in, and wanting to sort of force them to fit in, or force them to sort of be better or more in alignment with the rest of the group, even though everyone's completely unique. I mean, it's an insane, irrational concept of trying to force someone to fit in. But then again, all human beings do that to some degree. And so I felt like an enforcer of the culture or the herd of my cohort. And somehow that felt like a noble thing to do, even though I felt guilty inside bullying these kids. I mean, they already had so little, you know, they were already such outcasts. They already didn't have friends. I mean, they were the ones solo on the playground, and then I would go up to them because was told to or whatever, and intimidate them until they threw a punch or something at me, and then I would feel justified in hitting them. And I mean, it really kind of still haunts me today whenever I reflect on that. It's just like, God, that's so freaking awful. It's just, but what can I do now? You know, what can I do now? I don't remember these kids' names. I'm sure it had an impact. I don't know if it was a lasting impact, but it was definitely not a good impact. Now, fast forward a few years to middle school, and then I was sort of on the other end of this. I was the receiving end of a fair amount of bullying, mostly verbal, but it was really painful. And I didn't know how to deal with it. It was a new game that I didn't really want to play, and it really screwed me up in a lot of ways. It really made me nervous, and I felt unsafe, unworthy, and just not brave to be authentic in myself in the world. And that really plagued me through high school. I took on a performance air of confidence instead that was total bullshit. I've been called arrogant many times by friends of mine. And now part of that is also just the intellectual lineage that I've sort of bought into or you know, been grown into through my mother in her academic world and also my grandfather. And there's a bit of intellectual arrogance just in the culture that I was immersed in. But there's also this bit of arrogance, which is just pretending to be better. It's a framing mechanism. I'm like, well, I'm smarter, or I know best. And that framing is inherently manipulative. And this is what narcissists do, right? So back to me, in my narcissism, I've figured it out to a great extent. And that I tested in sort of, you know, mid-range, not clinical, but, you know, mid-range narcissistic tendencies, like 6 or 7 years ago when I first took one of these tests online. And I took the test again a couple weeks ago, and I scored much, much lower. And I could see why I scored lower. It was because there were specific questions that I answered differently today. One of which was, I am special, versus I am no more special than anyone else. A few years ago, I would have had to answer, I am special, because that's what I felt. And to some degree, I still have that inkling of, like, well, aren't I special? But when you think about it philosophically, I am special is completely meaningless. It's a meaningless statement. And all it does for us is justify us being more entitled than other people. It's inherently unfair. It's not objectively speaking, there's no such thing as special. You know what I mean? It's a subjective label, but it does justify us being bullies to other people. And that's what's so wrong about it. And now I don't need that feeling. I don't need to feel special. I don't actually think I am special. I think I'm like everybody else. I'm unique and different in my own ways, just like everybody else is unique and different in their ways. And that's fine. But it's what I do with who I am that really matters, and it doesn't make me special. That's a nonsense concept. So I didn't need that anymore. I also didn't need to think I'm a natural born leader. It's like leadership actually takes a lot of work to do it well. And it doesn't matter if you have the attributes of a natural born leader, it's mostly about doing the leadership well. And that takes training and practice and caring about other people and what they think and creating more of a synergistic relationship, not an all top-down bullying mentality, which is actually the worst form of leadership, as social psychology has now shown. And there was also just, any questions about entitlement or I basically came through to a point where I'm not needing my story to make me worthy, because I'm already feeling worthy as a human being. I don't need any external validation to prove that I'm worthy. I don't need to dominate the conversation because I think I have more to say than everybody else. The actual attitude of humility, of being more interested in what other people have to say, is why I might become smarter, because I'm humble enough to listen. And so I've changed, and I've changed largely through psychological and spiritual pursuits, through essentially trying to dethrone the ego. And so when I talk about narcissism, I think it is the universal psychosis of our day, but not just of our day, of all human history. And if you look at most religions, they're about dethroning the ego. They're about taking us down a notch so that we're not so arrogant and dominating of other people. And this is so awesome because basically we've got 10 to 70,000 years of human history where religions have been working on this problem. And now psychology is just catching up and going, oh, look, it's called narcissism. And guess what? That person's a bad apple and the rest of us are good guys. And that's complete BS. It is just not true. Now, I will say this one caveat. Absolutely, if you're being abused by somebody, you need to get away from the abuse. You need to put your boundaries up. If they don't respect your boundaries, get away from that person. That's a no-brainer. That's clear and concise. And that's what a lot of psychologists online are trying to tell people. Like, don't try to fix these people. They will take you down with them. They will abuse you until you're not who you were anymore, and you will not like it. Don't sacrifice yourself for them. And I completely agree with that advice. But I think the first advice that should be given, since we're all a little bit narcissistic, and most of us are not at the high level of narcissistic personality disorder such that we can't be helped. I think the right advice to give first is, here's abusive behavior, and here's how to disarm people who are feeling unworthy, who are feeling that their self-esteem is low. Build them up. Give them compliments. See their inherent beauty and say, hey, you don't have to do anything to be worthy. You're already worthy, just the way you are. You are beautiful, just the way you are, without any performance, without any makeup, without any fancy dancy do, whatever. Like, you are beautiful, and I see you, period. The most common form of parenting mistake that causes narcissism is to praise children for their actions, for their successes, but not for their efforts or their attitude. To basically give them external validation constantly for their success, but not for who they innately are. And that's what we're doing as adults as well. It's all about success. It's all about the ends justify the means. But really, life is all about the means. It's all about what we do and the attitude we bring to it. And we're all going to be much better at everything if we are feeling resourced, if we are feeling loved and taken care of at the rudimentary level. If we're feeling worthy and included in the tribe, then we're already in. We're already healthy. We already have brain equilibrium enough to learn better and to succeed. And so I think that if we take care of each other first and foremost, if you notice some narcissistic traits in a friend of yours, think to yourself, What is this person needing? What is this person feeling? How can I acknowledge their feelings and meet their needs? Not through self-sacrifice, mind you. Keep your boundaries, keep yourself safe, but try to serve them. Try to give them a compliment. Say, hey, you don't need to prove yourself. You're already worthy. This is how we turn on the angels of our better nature and turn off the narcissism. Okay? And I think this advice is very good advice for everybody, because most of the people you're going to meet in life are not people with narcissistic personality disorder who can't be helped. Most of them are going to be people like you and me who can be helped, who just need a little encouragement, a little love. And here's the dark thread of this whole concept of othering the narcissist, is that the term gaslighting, very popular today because it happens, right? Where people try to basically take down your reality and tell you you're delusional, even though you saw them do something. They're like, no, I didn't do that, and blah, 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 blah. That's in your head, blah, 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 blah. This gaslighting technique that people use to manipulate and sort of make somebody question their own reality. Well, guess what? While that may be true at some times, all of the time, we're all living in a delusional reality. All of us. Just by the nature of the mind. We are creating a story every minute that is the delusional reality we live in. And so when someone questions our reality, that's not a clear indication that they're a narcissist or that they're gaslighting us. It could be that they're like, hey, I don't think you've got a clear perspective on this. And you might say the same thing to them. And so the problem with this gaslighting term being thrown around, like you can immediately label somebody a villain because they're gaslighting you, is that it prevents us from ever questioning anybody's delusional reality. And that's a problem because we're delusional inherently based on the basic brain activity that we all have. And we work with each other to get a more accurate version of reality, to make sure our delusion is not as far off from the common reality. Like we work together to achieve truth-ishness, if you will, to be closer to reality. We check each other's work. And so throwing the gaslighting term around is a problem, because it means that my reality can now never be questioned. And the highest level of narcissism is people are basically living in a highly warped, delusional reality in which they are the hero. Everything they do is good. Everything that hurts them is somebody else who's bad doing it to them. That's what the ego does when it's really low resourced for a long, long time. It turns people's reality into this warped system that filters out any kind of criticism and filters in everything that makes us the good guy and others the bad guy. It's basically too much anxiety in the system, or too much fear, and no sense of worthiness. It's always trying to make up for that unworthiness belief. So the othering of the narcissist is a problem. I think in generally we need to embrace the narcissist within, to recognize that I too have narcissism, because it's the universal basic sign of feeling unworthy. And I need to work on that. I need to work on self-love. I need to work on a sense of worthiness. And I need to notice these behaviors that I might be doing that could be harming others, ways that I'm bullying or even framing the conversation in a way that makes me better than them in order to keep power and control. This is the stuff we need to really tackle, because otherwise we're just going to be a bunch of mudslinging victims blaming everybody else for our own emotions. And that doesn't work. That will not solve any problems. Ultimately, what is the ego but a concept that keeps flipping back into reality? This sense of self that sort of, holds us like a girdle. And when we outgrow it, in a moment it breaks, but in seconds later it's back on there. And it changes over time if we do the work. The ego or sense of identity can evolve if we do really careful work to own our energy and our behaviors, to own our beliefs or challenge them. We can grow, and the ego can grow with us to be more humble, to be more accepting, that through loving ourselves, we are freer to love others. There's so much that we can do to better ourselves. Attacking the ego or trying to get rid of it is really a narcissistic projection. It's never going to happen. We're human beings. The ego is built into our brains as well. It's not going away. Maybe for a moment, 10 seconds of ecstatic bliss, and I feel so free, and then it's back on. And it's telling us how to defend ourselves and how to be higher status in society. So that's just going to happen. But what we can do is bring more awareness around these universal traits, these narcissistic reactions that we all have, ways that we abuse and manipulate each other. And that's what I'm working on. And I will share more when it's ready.